Morning, Steve, and welcome to No Worries. Thank you for coming along and talking
Thank
to
you.
us.
Thank
Now,
you for having me
first
as
of
well.
all, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Steve Parsons, obviously. I used to be an independent financial advisor up in East Yorkshire. And my dad, he came down with Alzheimer's. And if you can come down with Alzheimer's, if you know what I mean. And so we had to come back to Northampton to oversee his care. So that's what took us back down to Northamptonshire, which is where I grew up. He's still living in the same house as he was then. But now he's in a residential care home. So we oversaw his care for about 3.5 years, and now he's in residential care. But what happened was we saw during that process that we could help people in terms of their future planning, because we were doing it for my dad. So not only estate planning, which we'll go on to talk about today, but we do run a company called Safeguarding Futures, which looks at the estate planning market from a health and social care point of view. So we also oversee other people's care and put everything together for people who need help with a relative who's going into care. So the money side of things, as well as the actual hands-on organising the care and so on. So my wife Melanie, she oversees a lot of that. I do the estate planning bit, which is what you're going to ask me about today.
Yeah. So estate planning, what is estate planning? Because obviously when you talk about estate, somebody will think of property or houses. What is estate planning?
Well, estate planning is really getting your affairs in order. It's just a question of making sure that the money that you've worked hard for stays in the family as much as anything else. I mean, a lot of people used to use it. I mean, a lot of people think it's for rich people, estate planning, but rich families down the years have done this as a matter of instinct almost, for hundreds of years, and that's how they've preserved their wealth. Now you can say, well, a lot of people haven't got that kind of wealth, and that is obviously true, but a lot of people are sitting on quite a large piece of real estate now that they wouldn't have dreamt of 40 years ago. I mean, people would buy a house for £3,000, and now it's worth £300,000, isn't it? So that is real wealth, and that does need protecting. So it's not only, it isn't only properties. It's also the savings that you've accrued, and making sure that everything goes to the right people upon your death. So there's a lot of trust work involved. We write trusts in a lot of our wills to ensure that just that really, that the right people get the money that they're entitled to, and the wrong people don't, which is what essentially estate planning is. So it revolves around wills and trusts, really.
Okay, so wills, and I myself, obviously, and I suppose like a lot of people think, oh, wills are just for old grannies and granddads, and you don't do that until you retire. How important then is the will when it comes to estate planning?
Well, it's the fulcrum of it. It's the very centre of it. So it should be front and centre in most people's, or everybody's planning. I mean, if you're on your own, you're in rented accommodation, you've got no children from previous relationships, then yeah, and you've got no savings, then I can see why you wouldn't really want to bother making a will. But if you've got children, if you're married, if you've been married and you're not anymore, if you've obviously bought a house, then it's absolutely essential for everybody to do that kind of planning within a will, because it saves an awful lot of aggravation for your loved ones and family in the long run. And we see a lot of that. We see a lot of people who come to us in crisis. So and so my parents didn't leave a will, and what do we do? And when we help them with that, obviously the sort of probate side of things. But the penny sometimes doesn't drop with them that they should do the same thing, because their kids are going to be stuck in the same position as they are now if they don't do the right thing, which is obviously make a will and make provision for themselves. So that's how it works, really. It's very, very important, and everybody should have one, unless you've got nothing. I think that's have no conceivable prospect of ever having anything, which isn't very many people, really, when all said and done, is it?
No. So what's the youngest age you could make a will if somebody was asked me? Because obviously, I'm conscious that you have like teenage mums or people in the very young years that have got children. And I'm conscious that obviously you'd want to make sure they're looked after. So what's the youngest age you could make a legal will at?
At 18. So
Eight.
anybody over 18 can make a will. And it's perfectly reasonable for an 18-year-old single mum to do that. I know, tight, money's tight by definition for people in that situation. But yeah, I mean, if they've got the wherewithal to do it, they should make a will, and they can do that from 18.
And can we alter our wills? You know, if something happens, like a divorcee gets remarried, or a widow gets remarried, can we alter our wills?
Very much so. I mean, a will's a sort of, will planning is a sort of organic thing, if you like. It's a lifetime. Um, it's for life, really. So you can alter your wills on all sorts of premises. You have to write a new will on marriage, because if you remarry, then that invalidates your old will anyway. So that can be a trigger point for people to write wills. Often people alter their wills when they have new children or grandchildren, and or buy property, and sometimes go into business as well. They like to protect their business assets too. So very much so. Yeah, it can be altered. It can be altered very easily. I mean, sometimes the sister will dress this up in to charge a little bit more, but yeah, it can be altered relatively easily.
So it's all about talking to the specialist and keeping the dialogue open and going back to you and talking to you about life-changing situations so that it's kept up to date.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, and don't leave it until it's too late in some ways.
Is there a central register like there is for, say, like in pensions, you have the pension tracing service? Is there a central register that people can go to see if their relatives have a will if they can't find it anywhere in the home?
There is. It's called the National Will Register, but not very many people use it. So it's only as good as the number of wills that are on that register. So people don't tend to get their wills registered. We're actually registering, in the process of registering retrospectively, all the wills that we've done on the National Will Register, and obviously they produce a card to tell people where the will is, the executors anyway. So if it's the executors should know where that will's stored. Otherwise, it's pointless. We've had one or two situations where wills have been lost, and it's vital that people do know where it is. So it is the National Will Register. But as I say, it's something that's underused, and it needs to be that needs to be addressed, really.
So it's a case of moving forward. Okay. What else is another area that's of vital importance when you're looking at estate planning to make things go smoothly for maybe the ones that are left behind you?
Well, I think within a will, you can write trusts to make sure that your property is protected from long-term care fees or inheritance tax. And a properly written trust can save an awful lot of money and a lot of heartache further down the line. And those trusts will ring fence that money for the benefit of people who might be vulnerable, perhaps, and it ensures that the money doesn't go to people it shouldn't do. So it doesn't disappear sideways. So if you've got, if you pass away young and your husband, say, goes to Spain and marries a senorita with lots of children, that senorita with lots of children will eventually inherit your money, because she's married your ex-husband, and of course your children will be disinherited accordingly.
That's one of the, I mean, everybody now with these new relationships are so what I call loved up. They forget to look at some of these things.
I mean, you'd rather be loved up, though, wouldn't you? I mean,
but at the same time, I just hate clearing up the mess for people when it's all gone horribly wrong. And it's like...
Absolutely, yeah. And it's always that crisis point where things need sorting out, and they've not considered the ramifications of what they're doing, really. Yeah. So that's where we come in.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard that lasting powers of attorney are good, not just personally, but for business as well. How do they fit into the estate planning side of things?
Well, if you consider that wills deal with your affairs beyond the grave, once you've passed away, but lasting powers of attorney deal with your affairs this side of the grave. So there are two types of lasting power of attorney, one for property and finance and one for health and welfare. And you can use those to appoint people to act on your behalf if you lose capacity. So if you develop an illness such as dementia, then you can have people who can act for you. You have to make those lasting powers of attorney when you have got capacity, but then they come into play if you sadly lose capacity. And that they're very, very powerful documents. I mean, everybody really should have a lasting power of attorney. I mean, I said that about wills earlier on, but I'm absolutely adamant that everybody should have an LPA because of both sorts, but particularly for the financial side of things, because it just protects you and makes you, because you don't know if you're going to walk in front of a bus tomorrow and end up in a coma. You know, it's like brain injury. We've had a lot of those in young people. You know, and we've gone and helped them out. And people with learning disabilities, it's handy for if they're able to do it. The parents of people with learning disabilities, the disabled child coming out of children's services where everything's done for them into adult services where they've got to kind of fend for themselves, then it's very handy for the parent to be able to go into bat for their kids really on an ongoing basis, because that's the children have always been in that situation where they can't go into bat for themselves, but they have to have obviously pass a capacity test, so it's not always possible to get those ones over the line. But we've got techniques to use to do that.
So again, so what about businesses? Because I'm conscious lots of business like ourselves have all these small businesses or sole traders, and one day you're standing there, the next minute you could go completely crazy and completely gaga. And it's like suddenly, to me, if there isn't someone to sign that check or make that decision, you've lost your business, you've lost your lifestyle, everything just spirals downwards. Is it important for it is there a separate one for businesses, or is it inclusive in the ones that you're doing?
It really depends on how the business is structured, but for limited companies, yes, it's vital that we should, or LLPs, it's vital that they have powers of attorney in place. You can imagine if you're in a business partnership, and you do develop Alzheimer's, your business partner isn't going to want you anywhere near that business. And, so you really do need to make provision for somebody to act in your stead who can make those business decisions for you. So you're appointing people that you trust to make those business decisions for you, so the business can carry on. If you're a sole trader, obviously, it doesn't matter. You're appointing people who can carry your business on, probably, but whether the business is able to be carried on by those people is a moot thing, isn't it? Because they might not have the skills that you had if you obviously did start to suffer from dementia. The business, that would be the end of the business, really, wouldn't it, in most cases? Because you're trying to get somebody to somebody to do that would be difficult, I think. But
Okay.
yeah.
Brilliant. No, that's great. Now you talk about probate. I mean, that people look at me and go, what is that, and why do I need it, and why does that fall into the remit of estate planning?
When you've got a will, or whether you haven't really, when somebody passes away, to put it simply, the will should go to probate. So the executors will actually go and apply for a grant of probate, so they can discharge the terms of the will. So that basically means that you swear an oath, you get a grant of probate, then you can go and deal with the banks and dispose of any property and all of that sort of thing legally. So it provides the legal framework for you to do that. If the estate's very small, there's no need for probate. If it's less than £5,000, some banks have limits that they don't need probate, but it's all different. So Barclays will be different from Santander, will be different from NatWest. But most estates will need a grant of probate, so the executors can legally act in disposing of property, as I say, and winding up bank accounts and making sure that the beneficiaries get their due.
Yeah, so it's very important, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh no, thank you. That's really interesting to find out about estate planning. So thank you, Steve, for explaining it to us. And that maybe one day we can look into other areas more deeply of what is actually involved in making a will and what
Certainly,
you need to do.
absolutely. Yeah,
So
yeah,
thank you
complete
very much for coming to For You No Worries and talking to us.
pleasure.
So
Thank
thank
you very
you.
much.
Oh,
Cheers, Yvonne.
thank you.
Bye bye.